Mireille is on mute.
Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone joining us on the stream. My name is Mireille Bourgeois, and I'm the Artistic Director and Founder of IOTA Institute. We know there are people joining us from many regions of the world. Thank you for being here at the third of a series titled the BioArt Kitchen Hangout. This event is a collaboration with the INCUBATOR Art Lab in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, and bioartist Dr. Jennifer Willett, and is partly funded by the Canada Council for the Arts and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. We begin this event today by acknowledging that though we're gathering virtually across territories, we all remain rooted in our physical communities on Indigenous land. Many of us are joining from Chipuktuk, currently known as Halifax, Nova Scotia, on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We welcome everyone in this event to consider how our conversations are rooted in the territorial and cultural sovereignty of Indigenous peoples in all our regions, knowledges and practices remotely and after we part today. I'll introduce our IOTA team for today. Directing the technical details of this event is our research and curatorial assistant, Amanda Shore. And behind the scenes working on our live social media is Anna Valesco, who is also moderating our stream for questions. On the INCUBATOR Art Lab, we have Jennifer Willett, Angela Awada, and Domenica Mediati. On the Hackteria side, we have Dr. Marc Dusseiller from Hackteria, who is video streaming with support from his colleagues at the Swiss Chaos Video Operation Center. When you have questions throughout the stream, post them to our YouTube live stream chat, and we'll try to get all of them throughout the Hangout. You'll notice that we have captioning for this event. A recording and transcript of this Hangout will be made available to download after the event on our BioArt Kitchen project page. Today, for a short hour, we will tour Hackteria's lab in the hackerspace Bitwäscherei in Thank you, Marc. Through the perspective of bioartist Jennifer Willett in her lab in Windsor, Canada, where she's also going to share her new publicly accessible studio lab space. Marc Dusseiller will give a short presentation on Hackteria, and we will answer your questions in a short Q&A period. I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Marc Dusseiller from Hackteria Open Source Biological Arts. Dusseiller is a transdisciplinary scholar, lecturer for micro and nanotechnology, cultural facilitator, and artist. He performs do-it-yourself workshops in lo-fi electronics and synths, hardware hacking for citizen science, and DIY microscopy. He co-organized Doc 18 Room for Media Cultures, DIY Festival in Zurich, Kiblix 2011 in Slovenia, workshops for artists, schools, and children as the former president of the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society. He has worked as guest faculty mentor at various schools, Sri Shiti Manipal Institute of Art and Design and Technology in India, the University of California in the USA, and in multiple universities in Switzerland. In collaboration with the Kapelika Gallery, he has started the Biotena Lab in Ljubljana, an open platform for interdisciplinary and artistic research on life sciences. He was the co-organizers of the different editions of Hackteria Lab between 2010 and 2017 and collaborated on the organization of bioart events and conferences in Italy and China. Currently, he's developing means to perform bio and nanotechnology research and dissemination through Hackteria in a do-it-yourself and do-it-with-others fashion in kitchens, ateliers, and in the majority world. Today, we're going to learn about hacker networks, citizen science, and do-it-yourself and do-it-with-others approaches to sharing open source biological arts through Hackteria. And we're going to hop right into a lab tour with Jennifer and Marc. And I'll pass it over to you, Marc.
Yeah, welcome everybody. So it's really nice that you brought together such an interesting group from the other side of the pond. Maybe you see already, not our lab, but you see the view from our new space. So what you see, it's the tallest building we have in Switzerland, and somehow we just moved in next door.
What city are you in, Marc?
I'm in Zurich. So I've been kind of moving here like 25 years ago. So Zurich is kind of my home base. But as I will tell also later, I've been working mostly internationally. You heard already, I've been doing projects in India, Indonesia, or Slovenia. But recently, partially due to the pandemic, but also partially because we have a new space now in Zurich, it's a reason to be more often here.
Can you actually talk a little bit about that? You were telling me last time we met, and I read your paper, that you often thought labs don't necessarily always need a space, that they could be in your pocket, or they could happen for a moment and then disappear. So what made you start your own space?
Good point. I'm still like, think maybe it was a bad idea. And I want also to make sure we keep this mobility alive. I will talk a little bit more about this kind of mobile labs and temporary labs during my presentation. What was the reason to start the space? So partially, I was always involved already in a space, which was more like a maker hackerspace in the electronics community. And so I learned a bit from this experience what it means to have a space. And for Hackteria, when we started it, we never had this idea of a space because it was a collaborative project with people from different parts of the world to begin with. And I still believe like Hackteria should keep that network character and like, organize global like meetings and travel around. But there has been an opportunity also to finally start a real lab. And one reason why I did not want to start a biolab in Zurich, I'm not able to see the live chat. I don't know what that means, but yeah, sorry, I should maybe not even read it. So one reason is like the community that is interested in biology as a kind of DIY community or an artist community, it's very small. Unlike, let's say, media arts or like electronic people like building stuff and 3D printing, there's a huge community, even in one small town. So we thought it's better to connect people from different places and use existing environments to do our own experiments. Because it might happen that suddenly you're stuck to the lab and you never go out, and then you're stuck with like paying a rent, and you're stuck with getting funding instead of kind of working on the projects. And so, but now I think the time was right in Zurich and we had a good opportunity to start the lab.
So show us around a little bit and tell us about your space.
So what we see now is you see the background is we call it Open Science Lab. And I think on the other camera, at the moment, you see just a view. I think I should have to change the other camera view. So this, I don't know, I think zoom out, thanks Stahl. So we have Stahl, an old friend also from our electronics community, the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, who helps me with the camera. And here I switch also to the other camera. So what you see here is what we call the Open Science Lab. It's not physically really disconnected from the rest of a larger space that is called Bitwäscherei. And maybe some of you see the color scheme of our background, but coincidentally, we have a perfect replica of the kitchen of our friends in Indonesia, in Yogyakarta. The group is called Lifebetch. So from an exhibition from 3 years ago that Maya Mindo did, we set up kind of a replication of our Indonesian friends' kind of kitchen.
I was going to say it looked like a kitchen. And it reminded me maybe of the tiles from like a kitchens I may have seen in Thailand or something like that. So this is really a replica of a kitchen in Indonesia.
Mostly the wall and this kind of wooden boards here. And the blue thing. And here would be the door to the garden where we sit around under palm trees and drink coffee. But what I want to do now is I want to switch to the other camera.
Sure. Show us what else you got.
Can you give me the camera? Oh, no, I pick it up. So I think now you have maybe a larger view of what I see at the moment, moving around with the camera.
Yes.
Perfect. So the wall is some kind of replica that we just had lying around from an exhibition. And as you see up here, it's not like physically disconnected to the rest of the place.
Yeah.
And then we added some other furniture, especially this really, really big one that also was a kitchen.
Cool.
And it's on wheels.
Oh, it looks like a commercial kitchen.
It is kind of a self-made gastro kitchen, yes. It has also like this kind of heating thingy.
Our lab is also based on a kitchen, but we're thinking about a domestic kitchen when we designed ours, like maybe a North American kitchen. And we even have the weirdo chandelier that a lot of people in suburban kitchens in Canada might have.
Yeah, I think a lot of if we look back in biology, it started in the kitchen. A lot of the processes are based on kitchens, and it's something we always wanted as a kind of more cozy environment. We wanted also this space to look more like a kitchen, and we had a kitchen already. Like some of the co-founders of this science lab come mostly from food art, from fermentation. And so this stuff is from Maya Minder, one of the colleagues of ours, and we were also together in Indonesia. So this was from her last space, and now it's not a kitchen anymore because we sat in the space.
Is that a stovetop on the counter there? It looks like a stovetop. The black area in front of you.
Yeah. It's somehow electric.
I love it.
And so the drawers were already installed, and this is kind of our lab drawers now.
So
and
cool.
It was heavy to put in the 5th floor. And now we put some wheels so we can move it into the larger space that we are kind of involved with. And let's do a performance kitchen event or a fermentation event. It's primarily now for kind of a science workbench, we call it.
So you have a lab and you have a maker space. Like we've developed a similar strategy where we have this lab and then we also have a studio space which serves some of the similar purposes, right? Like a wet space and a more dry space or electronic space for you. Ours is more of a builder space.
Exactly. So if we look now, I think you see me to the other side. So here, just next, we have the maker space, which is, let's call it this Mechad lab.
Hi.
And you also see the camera guy, the other camera guy, Stahl.
And
so
what's
both
that on the ceiling? Like you have a weird light fixture on your ceiling too.
Where the ceiling?
A big pink one.
Yeah, that's our lights.
That's beautiful.
And so I was involved with Stahl in the foundation of the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, and we run this electronic synthesizer geek space already for many years. And we moved together with some other groups into the new space, which gave finally space also for adding a wet lab, an open science lab.
You know, I think our aesthetics are very different, but a lot of the planning is actually quite similar. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And so when we started with the open science lab, what was funny is that we asked around who wants to start doing things. And of course, mostly the mushroom growers moved in. And so in this corner, there's a lot of this mushroom grower person's stuff. A lot of empty vessels and kind of a little flow hood to have a sterile work area here.
Do they leave spores all over the place? We had a spore explosion last week.
It's because we mix fermentation and molding and kind of having people leaving around pizzas because it's also a hackerspace. So we have massive mold infestations. Yes, it's difficult to work sterile. That's why we got a second room in the basement for sterile mushroom work. But we also use this space not only for biology. So I don't know if you know about etching PCBs, like printed circuit boards. So we use it also as a kind of photochemistry lab.
Very cool. I've never done that, but I am an intaglio printer, so I can etch copper plates.
Yeah, this is somehow the same. We have UV lights, we have other photochemistry, and some shelves from IKEA.
Everyone has shelves from IKEA.
And so we didn't plan to set up, let's say, a lot of equipment to start with. We just put this, let's say, a bench and some tables to kind of look at who will come and what they want to need. And also build the equipment together. So people that join will kind of take ownership because we kind of build the stuff together. We also don't have the money, but I also think conceptually, instead of establishing a perfect empty infrastructure-based lab, we just had, let's say, tables and benches and empty shelves, and now it's slowly being filled.
Are there ways for people to come see what you're doing? Like, can they see through a window, or is there a public space, or is it more private?
So people can see through the window. So we're on the 3rd floor.
Yes.
We're on the 3rd floor. We are in the kind of the coolest part of Zurich, the city center. These are the banks. But it is kind of a intermediate use house for intermediate use. Let me check this. So the city gave this for 5 years, mostly for creatives and for studios. And so there's a lot of people coming in and out. And as a hackerspace, which we are part of, this is generally a public space. People can come in. There's certain kind of opening hours, but in general, people are here and the door is open. So we have quite a big visibility, especially compared to our old makerspace. The house holds maybe, I don't know, 200 artists that have studios here.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
And we already have a lot of connections, especially on the fermentation. A lot of people are interested on the electronics and controlling some LEDs. A lot of people are interested.
So we just opened a new community space where Dom is at. Dom, do you want to turn the thing around so people can see? It's a storefront window, so people can see right inside.
Super.
See, so they're right on the ground floor, and we're right across the street from like the best art bar and the symphony. There's Dom. So Marc, what is your favorite thing about your spot? Because I bet we're gonna have to wrap it up soon.
I think I want to maybe briefly go through the other parts of the space. So
show us.
So this is, it's like the same space. So we all share the same stuff. It's not that it's separated. So here are some other friends from the Mechatronic Art Society.
Hi.
And these are more like, let's say, call them the workbenches for hardware, electronics, and also computer work. We have a chill out zone, sofas.
Oh, I love it. Do people sleep there? Do they spend the night?
So it's a bit hard to hear you at the moment. So that's why I give the camera to Stahl, and he will show us through the rest of the space, and I will just kind of look what he's showing us.
Okay.
I'm back. So now I can hear you again.
So do people spend the night in the chill zone? Like, do people sleep there sometimes?
I do. When officially we don't want someone to move in, but it's people have, like, say, they're from the other cities in Switzerland. Of course, they're welcome to sleep there. So we also have a woodworking place.
Oh, this is beautiful.
And because we merged together, so the new space called Bitwäscherei was a kind of, we not merged as an organization, but the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society is one of the bigger ones, and the Chaos Computer Club Zurich, which are connected to the larger European, especially German Chaos Computer Club network, which is huge. And we already had an interaction with IOTA on New Year's about that.
Yes.
They also have all these digital tools available, like the streaming stations.
So how many square meters? Like, this seems like a large space.
It's 300 square meters. I think Stahl now shows where the chicken used to live. We also had 2 chickens in the hackerspace.
Did you?
We now have, how I call it, a court case, because somehow illegal use of chicken for advertisement. We have the Tesla coil. We have kind of a more different quiet zone, work zone. So we have meetings and can at the same time play music. There's another group called Digitale Gesellschaft, which mostly works on kind of politics, like they make referendums and initiatives on kind of privacy and internet things.
This is beautiful. I'm going to have to come check it out once we're allowed to do that again.
Yeah, and so for a small group of people, we use it as a daily workspace. Mm-hmm. We have also a real kitchen where we cook. And we want to build a better kitchen. This is really a prototype. We haven't yet had the money and the time to plan. Like, we don't have water at the moment, so we have big barrels and we pull them in and out from the hallway. It's perfect.
Do you have water in your lab, though? But
no, not yet. We have a sink, but we just collect it in a bucket.
Oh, okay.
And so now we have a kind of 100 square meter, like, say, public space for workshops, for presentations, for performances, where he's now walking around. And we have computers, a VR station. Yeah.
So how long have you guys all been here for?
We moved in summer and then renovated things, built the walls. Everything was empty, so we built all the walls and built everything ourselves. The Cactus Geek. And when we did a few stuff. We have a group also coming to kind of start using the lab for fermentation, for mushrooms, but also a bit of this kind of, some young students came to work on the Odin kits, like doing the Biohack 101 class here. We have old school overhead projectors. And I think slowly we come to the entrance. And that's kind of the entrance where, you register your name for some kind of, and then toilet. And there's water like in the hallway, so it's not too far.
And you said the city gave you guys this space?
Not gave, but it's like it's an old city infrastructure for washing textiles, and for 5.5 years they gave it quite affordable for Zurich, and
Wonderful.
it's really in the center.
Congratulations, it's really beautiful.
This is outside the entrance. There's a piano, but then and toilets stuff.
Thanks so much for this amazing lab tour, Marc and Jennifer. Really, really appreciate it. Beautiful spaces, both of you. Is there any last question, Jennifer, that you have for Marc, or Marc that you have for Jennifer?
No, you've answered all my questions. Do you have any questions for us, Marc?
Yeah, when you said you have a public, like you have a street level like place that people can just.
Yeah, so we have two spaces. One is the lab that I'm in right now, and it actually has a glass wall so that when people are walking through the building, they can see inside of our lab. So we can do performances for people there. And then the other space is Dominica is online with them right now, and it's a studio space, but it will also be a BSL level 1 laboratory where people can come. See that greenhouse there, Dom? You can show them the greenhouse. We're building a BSL level 1 in the greenhouse. And then it will become a beautiful artwork. And then we can host workshops, but we also build things in that space. So we have big sculptural objects and stuff that we're always building. So we needed a maker space to do that in, because you can't do that in this lab.
Amazing.
Amanda, street level visibility is something we've always been dreaming of.
Yeah, it's new for us. It's very exciting. We just got it a couple months ago. We're going to actually do a big virtual opening next month. So I'm excited to see what happens when regular people start coming in to ask us what we're doing.
I can't wait to hear that either, Jennifer. I'm sure we'll have lots of chances to talk about that again.
Thanks so much, Marc. It was great to see your space.
Thank you. And I think now I'd love to hear more about Hackteria, Marc. Do you want to take over the presentation and do your thing?
We could. Can you briefly switch this other camera, Stahl? I'll switch some cameras. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Thank you.
So I don't know what you see, but oh, wrong one. This one. So I don't know what you see at the moment on all the different cameras, but I think Hackteria has very much like approached the topic of the laboratory in a very broad sense, in a very also kind of as a word to reflect, but never, as we said before, as a physical space that limits you, never a laboratory as a prison. And on one of the views you see, I think, a microscopic view of our molds that we are growing at the moment. I hope I can. Ah, you switched again, Stahl. Good. So I have to look a bit to make it focused. So we always, I think, zoomed into like a microscopic world of kind of artistic interactions with the small living beings. More, I would say, on microscopic level than on ecosystem level. At the same time, like zoom out and also do stuff on the whole world. So I will switch to my slide view, and maybe Stahl can kind of zoom back and zoom a bit closer to me. I will sit down a little bit because I'm tired from walking around the whole day. So I hope you see my slides now.
We're all good.
So this is a photo that I have kind of, and let me check something. It's a photo that I have, a painting from 500 years old, I think from some kind of an alchemist's laboratory. And it was kind of inspiring in a meeting we had a few years ago, where also the founders from the Hackteria network, Yashas Shetty, were present, and we reflected a bit on exactly what we just said about. So we see here a laboratory of an alchemist. First of all, there's a lot of women involved. I think that's also a obvious see, and we also see this open window to the street. We see the children playing outside. And why do the old kind of alchemists laboratory have windows? they had some kind of spiritual theories and this and that, how whatever can go in and out, but maybe it's just good to have a well-ventilated place when we do certain chemical experiments. But this openness also of the open window to be visible by the public, I think, was inspiring us to reflect on. As well as the tools we see, the infrastructure, it looks very much like a kitchen. There is fireplaces, there is stuff to stir, there is pots, and so forth. So this topic of a laboratory was never for us a physical space. It was more like a thing like, how do we work together? That kind of laboratory means laborare in Latin or something. It's about, doing work. So briefly, a few words about myself. Why sometimes the coconuts appear. So I've been involved, as I mentioned before, I think after I got a kind of degree in nanotechnology and kind of the natural scientist, I got involved in the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, a kind of electronics art synthesizer community. We can call it makerspace, but we never liked the brand so much. And briefly later also with Hackteria, I started the company Center for Alternative Coconut Research, and I'm also showing some of the works from the co-founder, was Gaudens, who is also represented as Gaudi Labs, and so forth. I have many names. Marc Dusseiller was kind of French pronounced properly, finally. Also Dusjager, but I also have names from other parts in the world, like Marjono or Omjon. I have already a lab that I've been working on and inviting many people. I call it Rande Lab. It's kind of lucky that I got this house inherited from my grand-grandfather. It's in Switzerland. And you see kind of how we use also these kind of remote places to reflect on what is a laboratory, how the limited access to infrastructure also makes us creative. It's solar powered. It has no running water. But on the picture, if you look closely, you see friends from Indonesia, from South Africa, from Germany, from Nepal, from the United States, and so forth. So a lot of time we also use this setup as a laboratory and think, what can we do in the field, in the countryside that allows us to research together, to experiment together, and so forth. But my roots in the laboratory are really like production spaces in nanotechnology. So I've been sticking around in labs for a long time. This is a clean room for producing like nanostructured materials. My background is in material science. And I will show you a bit how my personal story led to this kind of global, weird, transdisciplinary work. Being trained as a material scientist and engineer, I started to work with living materials in my research as a PhD student. We were studying the interface of engineered materials with the living world, doing this by studying the molecules and proteins that are on the very surface of these materials that are in the end the key players when the living world interacts with the dead world, as you would see, for example, in an implant or also on a surface of a biosensor. We call it the nano-bio interface. My personal interest was very much in tissue engineering, and I kind of designed microscopic environments to kind of culture individual cells that mimic kind of the three-dimensional physical environment and chemical environment they also are exposed in the body. This kind of using these nanotech tools where we on a microscopic scale we're allowed to control growth of cells, and this already I think brought me a bit into some kind of visual and kind of aesthetics, and I already in the early 2000s I started to talk to designers and artists if they're not interested in using this technique that we can control like where cells grow by using the techniques I was developing. It is maybe a bit naive now. It's more like making a painting with cells, but somehow I think still a lot of bio art is kind of on that level. But as I said, when I stopped my research, I went into more the hackerspace communities, and I saw already at that time that a lot of these digital hackerspaces are getting interested in working with biology. It might be kind of DNA and data and privacy of stuff. But one thing that attracted me was the open source mindset that I already kind of explored in the scientific communities, that there is a strong idea of sharing and of kind of publishing your results freely. We're using open public licenses. And I got really motivated to move into this hackerspace and makerspace environment. I think most of you know about hackerspaces. If not, there is like hackerspace.org. These are kind of shared workshops, labs for people that have been existed since the 90s, and there was a big hype, let's say, in the later 2000s, and they're still around all over. And I prefer the term hackerspace. The difference that I make between a hacker and a maker, like the hot glue gun maybe being the symbol of the maker movement, like a hacker maybe opens up the tool, tries to find out what's inside, and maybe finds another use for it, while the maker just glues some things together. So this is the inside of a hot glue gun. And with the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, we also thought we should have a hackerspace. There's already a few others in Switzerland, in Zurich. And we started the Mechat Lab, we call it. The Swiss Mechatronic Art Society does a lot of workshops. It's very much to kind of social engagement also. It's kind of a bit geeky, but we are strong in also doing workshop with kids and with children. And suddenly, after my PhD doing this nanotechnology, I ended up doing electronics with children. I knew nothing about electronics, by the way. But I think teaching is very much about creating a learning environment and not so much about expert knowledge that you transfer to children's brains. This is a bit outdated. And here's a photo of our old space. So in 2000, kind of whatever, 6, 7, 8, we started a small electronics workshop in a rooftop. Yeah, this kind of for 10 years we were there. We had almost no one that sees us, but it was fun. And only recently, we had this opportunity to collectively share a space with a few other groups, which gives a lot more potentials. So this is briefly the new space. You see some of the tables look the same, maybe you see, but now we are part of a larger space. We have a kitchen facility. We have a lot more like public possibilities and also interactions with other communities in the house, but also in the space. Some stuff is German here, but this I showed you around already. But also with the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, it was never about the lab being the core of our activities. Maybe the core of our activities is our summer camp, where we rent a place in the forest, in the mountains, and bring all our tools there, and especially invite a lot of people, 30, 40, 50 people, to kind of spend a week on researching and sharing stuff together. So this mobility of conceptual mobility and also practical mobility, that everything is like set up in boxes, is something that I learned already in the Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, because we didn't start with the space. We started for a few years without the space. Also bring this community to the public and organize kind of course, events. So SGMK is also a kind of cultural organizer. And yeah, and these kind of labs, so I would call them temporary labs. They can be in the mountains for a week. They can be at the friend's studio, like you here. It's something that I think learned from this activity in Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, and was very much also influential for Hackteria, to kind of go to a place, bring people together that share and work for 2 weeks, for 1 week, or something like that. But kind of starting soldering like 15 years ago, I started to get invited all over the place, to India, to do some electronic circuits, to Indonesia to make some synthesizers, and it kind of changed the way I looked at the world. So I don't know if anybody knows what you see here, but I did not know what this is. Being from Switzerland, I was surprised that I had no idea where chocolate is made and how it grows on the tree. But this is a cacao fruit, and I had really no idea. So they don't teach us this in school, that we didn't invent the chocolate in Switzerland. In fact, I think it comes from South America anyway, but now it's grown also in Indonesia, and we believe we invented it in Switzerland. So I really started these opportunities with my earliest electronics workshops, really started to kind of make me look at the world from a different angle, as you see here. It's not upside down, by the way. The planet is round, a globe. It's not flat, but it's difficult to kind of show it on a slide. And in this, I think the same time when a lot of this kind of open source movement came into kind of software, hacker spaces, also media arts was a lot around open and sharing stuff. there was already a growing community of what they call DIY, not a growing, it just started in the same time when I kind of started to work in this culture. Most of these DIY bio communities started in other hackerspaces, and I heard on some kind of newsletter about this at the same time when we started here. And in fact, on a main list of this one, the Boston DIY Bio 2009, I heard about a call to join an event in Madrid called Interactivos. I will talk about this later. So this 2008 kind of showed a bit that it's possible, similar to these maker hackerspaces, to set up labs to do your own biological experiments, partially because stuff got much cheaper, partially because you can get second-hand from biotech companies that went bankrupt, and partially because you can build those devices, the infrastructure yourself. But somehow on this DIY bio mail list, when it just started, I ended up on it, and I heard about Interactivos, which is another kind of, I think, production lab. It's a 2 weeks event where Media Lab Prado in Madrid invites artists, hackers, open source enthusiasts, designers, whoever, to develop a prototype of a project and kind of force people to publish all their results with an open source mindset. And I joined as a kind of newbie to the culture scene, and Adam Gracie was kind of leading one of the research notes on garage astrobiology, and I joined his team. And I also met a musician and teacher and many things, Yashas Shetty, and we played music together, and there was kind of jam sessions in the evening. And at some kind of, during Interactivos, and when we talked a lot about bioart and kind of do-it-yourself biology and hacking kind of hardware to make environmental sensors, Yashas, Andy, and me, we thought somehow the bioart circles, the way they are set up back in 2009, they have this a bit elitist approach. You have to access to this fancy residency program to be a selected artist to go to this biolab of a research institution and then come up with some kind of random crap. Or the other way at that time is that you do this residency at Symbiotica and then you can become a bioartist. And we thought kind of from this DIY and maker mindset, if you can just like rot a piece of bread and put some wires in it, is maybe good enough to start with. So we thought we have to use this more hackerspace model and the open source culture model also for kind of bring that to bioart and inspire also producers, like art producers, to share their skills, to share instructions for other people to follow up. And so we started an idea that we called open source biological art under the name Hackteria, which was very much about knowledge sharing. And at that time it was really cool, you make some wiki and you share some instructions. It was kind of pre-Facebook era, and you have some mail lists where you communicate. These are all the tools a lot of the hackerspaces are very kind of aware of already since long time. But the strong focus was on building your own equipment and teaching other people to build their own laboratory, open source and also hardware. But it became more and more a kind of a friendly network of people that continuously collaborate and organize stuff together. And we call it like maybe an approach of radical transdisciplinarity. So it's not really about bioart at all. It's more like this kind of going beyond these disciplinary borders, collaborating across cultural borders and disciplinary borders, and sharing your knowledge through workshops, through websites, and so forth. So during the Interactivos, we set up our own first temporary laboratory. This was on the toilet in Media Lab Prado. Yashas and Andy and me, we bring some kind of kitchen tools from second-hand market, and we play with some chemicals and we play with some moss, and we were hunting tardigrades. So this was kind of a project that we developed together, also bringing my electronic skills into it, making coils and controlling LEDs. But I think the first project that started to inspire us, maybe I switch, was building microscopes. It's something I already developed personally as a student teaching class. I teach kind of nanotechnology, and I brought it into this Interactivos environment that you can build a microscope from a cheap webcam. And it costs $3, and the wow moment for whoever can be a creative, an artist designer, it can be a child, it can be a scientist, it can be whatever, your neighbor. This effect that you can build your own microscope and see the world from another kind of viewpoint It really inspires everybody. So it was a very fantastic workshop that we introduced. And we continuously did these kind of workshops, like, using then these microscopes for artistic interpretations. You can visually use it. You can use software to track the certain animals. And we did a lot of bioelectronics workshops, we call it, kind of using this DIY approach. And we did it kind of in different parts of the world. Because our co-founder, and I will go back, Yashas, he already also started a synthetic biology for artists and designers kind of summer class, joining iGEM. Maybe some of you have heard of this internationally genetically engineered machines competition, which is kind of a very geeky MIT elitist competition. But he was the first, I think, art school that joined the competition, and he used the opportunity to have a fun time with the art design students, working with the National Center for Biological Science to create these projects on genetics. And so this kind of was the starting point, I would say, from Andy's interest in, I don't know where it is, it's not here, Andy's interest in astrobiology and, working with tardigrades and kind of life in outer space, my interest in kind of maker and hardware and workshops, and Yasha's interest in synthetic biology and music. And so he invited me to India, and this was part of what I said before. There is a very different approach to what is hacking when you go to India. While here, I think a lot of us are kind of well educated, and we go here to the hackerspace in our free time to just have this extra time to work on kind of useless projects or kind of geek around. While Jugaad, an Indian term for these kind of self-made vehicles, it comes more from a lack of resource and an emergency, but it has this kind of similar innovative maybe output. But it comes from poverty, and these are just few, like say, innovative examples. Most people are just poor in India. And with this Jugaad, we have also embraced, and so we've started to build our own equipment with this kind of very Jugaad style as a process, more not so much as kind of having a functional equipment as a way to experiment with the way we communicate about biological labs. So on the top left, you see a PCR thermocycler, which is made from an old hairdryer. So we just heat and cool our samples. This is called PCR thermocycling. But some of these projects are then taken on to also be really developed into open hardware from Gaudi Labs. On the right side, you see a below $100 PCR machine that my friend Urs has developed over the years. But our creative temporary laboratories...
We've got a couple of minutes until we go to questions. I just want to let you know.
A couple of minutes, yeah. I think this is good. So here are the tardigrades. Let me jump through a few things. So I took just some old slideshow. I think this is a bit the history. So I want to go how these kind of workshops in all over the world and building microscope has really led to kind of this continuity of a community. And in the end, the website itself doesn't have so much content. It's not like instructables. In the end, it really developed into a kind of a group, not a collective, but kind of a network of regular activities. So Hackteria is somewhere set up between like the maker hackerspace movement and kind of bridging this mindset and the style to also, let's say, the more gallery-oriented bioart circles or the more, let's say, science ivory tower that happens in the universities. And it's especially these temporary laboratories that I mentioned in the beginning that we then also picked up as Hackteria. Inspired by Media Lab Prado, inspired also by SGM's case, Summer Lab, we started to organize this Hackteria Lab, we call it. It's a 2 weeks gathering of sometimes more, sometimes less, where you experiment with these ideas. It's also where the network has grown together and grown by itself. First one was in Switzerland, and we also make this temporary laboratory for children at Ars Electronica. And we make this kind of Hackteria Lab in India. We invited a lot of Asian participants there from Nepal, Indonesia. This led also to further collaborations in Nepal, working on space research. And the largest Hackteria Lab was the one in Indonesia in 2014, where myself, I was there for 4 months. Some people were there three weeks. The event is 2 weeks, very much influenced by our Indonesian partners from LifePatch, a lot of also Indonesian local partners. So we try to focus, not just bring some international people somewhere, but build upon the local kind of communities. And I think Indonesia was fantastic. So Hackteria's role was always bridging a bit maybe the European circles in DIY bio to some of these more global players from India, Nepal, Taiwan, Indonesia, and also Okinawa. There would be a movie, but I'll leave this for another time. So we tried to kind of organize another temporary lab in Okinawa. We did. It was a one-year program of residencies and activities in Taiwan, Indonesia, and Japan, 2019 and 20, also a bit to celebrate the 10-year existence of Hackteria. And I was the only international participant that managed to travel there. So on the 11th of March last year, I entered the plane, and I was the last person allowed to enter Japan.
Wow.
And then next day, no one was allowed to come anymore. And so we were just like in a small group with some locals doing some smaller experiment, more like a research, finding partners for a future larger event. My personal interest there was, again, with some kind of a humor, like everybody in the maker scene was building their own sterilization boxes for sterilizing masks and everything. I thought, okay, it wasn't so critical in Okinawa. So what else can we do with a sterilization box? It's UV light. I like UV light, so we can make T-shirts. So we made a lot of T-shirts with our UV sterilization. Yeah, why not? I would love to have your question, Jennifer.
Oh, I was telling Amanda, do you want me to, I want to wait until the question period starts. Or do you want me to?
I also saw it. This is anyway kind of where I wanted to finish. So I like kind of this kind of hacker mindset is we have a sterilization box and we want to sterilize masks. It might not work anyway, just get a new mask if you have them. But so even if the pandemic is over, we have all this equipment for sterilizing our food. We can still use it to make T-shirts. And we did some nice kind of UV bleaching, I think I would say. I don't know if it's good for the fibers. And I just want to finish again with what we discussed in the very beginning about giving you a tour to the Open Science Lab. So we're not specifically calling it a biolab, but we have a focus on this. There's a lot of discussion about what is open science. And it's a bit more my angle where I come from, unlike some other artists involved in the Hackteria network. With open science, I don't mean access to scientific publications. I don't mean going to a public event by the science institution that is for the families and stuff. I really mind openness as a more inclusive openness of being part of society. I also mean openness to other ways of knowledge generations from indigenous knowledges and stuff. I mean openness, something like this. So, but a lot of the more established institutional ideas, open science is accessibility. But I think this was some friend of mine has drawn. We see this Open Science Lab also a place where institutional scientists can come and work and see some other worlds. And we see kind of also, yeah, somehow merging it more with topics of society. And that's a bit what I wanted to do here. And this we saw already. These are some kind of topics we want to work here. Like we have a lot of this kind of fermentation, making materials, growing mushrooms. We have a lot of the hardware makers making equipments, making scientific equipment. And we have kind of DIY bio beginners level group doing some first experiments with genetics. We have a BSL-1 license. And I'm planning, it's already started, the project with Adam Zaretsky and Christian Delgado to go really into kind of reprotech and arts, germline hacking and designer babies. Creative germline construct bank, and using this kind of hacker and open source approach to work on kind of future form of the human body itself and developing these plasmids, partially speculative, but also partially practical. We will not do human experimentation, but anyway.
Thank you, Marc.
This is my final slide, so we can continue and meet every time. I think we have been here, some of us, before.
Thank you, Marc. Very appreciative of you sharing your very rich practice and amazing Hackteria community with us. Maybe we can go to gallery view for the questions and answers. That'd be great. I know that on our stream right now, we have viewers from Istanbul, Toronto, New York, and Brazil. I may have missed some places, but we're super happy to have everyone. Why don't we start briefly with Jennifer's question, and then I'll get into some of the community's questions.
Thank you so much, Mireille. So Marc, that was a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed hearing your take and why you're making the decisions that you are to organize yourself more networked and these sort of like erupting networked communities and bringing alternate voices and knowledge to the front. I also really value some of your criticisms of institutional or hierarchical or even maybe gallery-based bioart practices, although obviously I've really invested in that but I know what the strengths and weaknesses are. So you've told us a lot about the strengths of your model. What are the weaknesses? What are the challenging setbacks or weak aspects of the hacker networked international mobile model that you're operating under?
So one issue we had is like the earlier beginning idea was like, we want you to publish openly instructions and manuals to kind of do your bioart. And it was really hard to motivate people to do so. Like, it's some random wiki. There's no, why should someone do that? And so that it didn't really work that, in fact, it didn't work so well that people just publish stuff on the Hackteria wiki. From the artist side, I would say people just work on their perfectly finished dossier, I call it, like this kind of portfolio. But a wiki for publishing materials and methods to start your own bioart, it's not, let's say, there's no, what I call it, there's nothing you gain from it in a way. While in the software circles, which were inspiring for us, there is some kind of a community. You get famous if you kind of publish your GitHub repositories and, you know, modify other people's code. So that was lacking, and we also didn't manage to change that mindset. So a lot of the people in Hackteria network never published anything on the wiki. So that didn't really work. Our solution was we organized these meetings where we kind of have nice time together. We have food, we have friendship, and we kind of put a bit some pressure. Put it on the wiki. And also that didn't work so well.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
And the second thing was like, because it's kind of a network, but it wasn't originally meant as a network. And sometimes it's interpreted as a kind of Swiss collective, because somehow the Swiss group is maybe a bit more visible. And also sometimes money comes on the Swiss bank account, or also funding comes from here. So it was difficult. This kind of, it's not a collective, it's a network, but then still there's this kind of Swiss bank account behind it. And there is no, as a network, there's not a common topic. It's not that we all work on mushrooms. So being so broad, it's difficult, like what makes you part of it or not.
Thank you, Marc. We have a question. Marc, how do you negotiate ethics of certain activities in open science like self-experimenting? What responsibility does Hackteria take in educating members/public around, say, ingesting disinfectants?
Having this very kind of open source approach, so we try to do everything public. We try to motivate everybody to kind of document his work. As I said, it doesn't work so well, but I think that's kind of how we want to discuss it, is that it's nothing happens in secret. So also in a public space like this, I think it's not that we watch each other, but you know, people kind of are open about what they do. Self-experimentation, and we're not an institution that has to kind of control all the stuff. Hackteria is just like some kind of a loose approach to things. I don't have an answer to that. Like we try to keep having open discussion when we have a lot of discussion channels, and we try to bounce ideas from the network. And if some individual would do some weird things, I don't know, I think we just have to deal it like every other problem in your house. Legally, we're kind of okay, and there's some obligations we have.
Have there ever been attempts at censoring the information that you're providing in the open source?
Maybe. As a larger community, there's always like difficult peoples around. There's some trolling happening. We have some issues about this, and we try to work on it. But it's not that we censor or something, but of course sometimes, if the damage can be caused by individuals that are being very open, like everybody can join, we also have to deal with the fact that sometimes maybe it causes stress that is bad for the larger group. But this is not specific. I think every community has these issues.
We have another question. How big is your community? Do you do outreach, or do you just let people find you?
So it's changed a lot over the years. In the beginning, I think a lot of people tried to, outreach on a global scale, organizing these events, promoting it. And slowly, I think the network has grown. Meanwhile, this larger global network is not so much about growing it crazy more, but it is alive. It has a discussion forum. But of course, with the new space, it's something we want to do. And we already did the last couple of months. A lot of new people have showed up in the space because and it will change, I would say, like Hackteria as a whole, a global network will not change, but something new, I call it Hackteria Z, that has its own kind of identity a bit, will be much more focused on getting the local communities, and we're also connecting to like research institutions, and a lot of people showed interest. And of course, me as a person and other people that are involved here in setting it up, we already are connected in Zurich, through other activities. So we try to bring them all in. And it wasn't perfect timing that we could have kind of really started with a bang last autumn or something, because then was when we started to lock down events. But it also gives us time to slowly reflect, gives us a bit kind of do some support time to kind of set up the NICE, make a new website, and conceptually think about how we want to grow this place and the community around it.
We have another question. What do you think about bringing the hacking community online? Can it add something new to the process of biohacking with the public, or does it just complicate the message?
In fact, generally the do-it-yourself biology networks and the biohacking community is very open. There's a lot of Facebook groups, and a lot of the ideas and experiments are discussed online. So it's something that we're just part of. And having had these discussions with also the securities and kind of the FBI spying on us and all that stuff, I think it's the best defense is just to be totally public and open about all your activities. So I think it gives you the best credibility also. If people are maybe they don't know what you're doing or they're afraid, I think this is partially to protect ourselves, like if everything's public, and also as a role model to, I think, how institutional research science should be done. I don't think someone should secretly plan experiments on babies and embryos, write a grant, show it only to a committee, and only show it to the world when it's done. I do think we have to discuss our ideas much earlier. And in a way, we are a role model of how this early stage of ideation for research projects can also be done in social media, in open communication channels.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And do you think that it provides just another entry point into this idea of kind of access, because access and hacking, is something that is seen as going so hand in hand. But is it really, how does, going online, but then also creating a physical lab kind of adds to the idea of access for your community? I know you said you want to go to reach into the local a little bit more, but maybe kind of deeper into the concept of hacking.
There's many questions. So
sorry about
what I mentioned before, so the purely online community, which was maybe a 2008-9 idea, it didn't work so well anyway. So we quite fast went into physical interactions through these temporary labs, like happening in India or in Switzerland, bringing real people in physical world together, but being at the same time connected to the global community online. So the pure online community was never, it was a little bit the idea, but then we dropped it from the very beginning. And now, like 10 years after having this global community, it's also fun if new people come into this space, they see, whoa, someone else has already done stuff, and maybe they get support from the larger global network. That's ideally. And I still struggle a bit to get some people who totally come new to this place, to get them into this mindset that we're just like one node of a larger Hackteria network, but also even larger activities and network activities that are happening in many communities all over the world. Mm-hmm. And they only see this lab when they enter the space. So this is something I'm still worried about, how we can make this bridge.
Thank you. And there's one last question, and it's a question I think it's a question that both you and IOTA can answer, but I'll give you the floor first. So the question is, where is the next big meeting / gathering going to happen post-COVID times? Loved this session.
So I would love to meet some people in Indonesia again. And we're thinking about Thailand, Bangkok, like with the friends that were co-organizing Okinawa. We thought that we should do something in Thailand and do a whole kind of residency program. So from the global network, we continue, I think, Asian activities that I'm involved. But then here, like, of course, it's another note. We hope to make regular activities.
Thank you.
I am working professionally here, yes. I did read the question. Should I answer it?
Yes, we should read it out loud first, though, for our audience. So Angela Owada, who's in the incubator studio lab, in the incubator lab, sorry, wants to know if Marc does this full time. Does he also work professionally somewhere else?
And I try to be professional with this kind of work. It's rarely paid very well, of course. I think a lot of these community spaces are based on a high volunteering effort. I'm a bit in the lucky position that I have some teaching positions, kind of not fixed positions, but I give like one lecture, or I give a project week, or I have a regular like one semester class in Swiss universities, where I also bring these ideas in. And having a PhD and being like teaching at the university level is quite well paid in Switzerland. And I should need a few more of those. And I do want to kind of have more professional funding available for these activities. But sometimes we get funding for projects. Sometimes I win a prize, a culture prize, and can live from it. But mostly I live on a very little budget and spend a lot of time in Indonesia. That helps.
So the people that come into your lab, do they have, say, funding or grants of their own? Do they come with their own sources of funding, or do you apply for project funding, say, to kind of source projects together collaboratively?
So the hackerspace as a whole is a bit opposed to getting funding. So it's self-run to keep the freedom. Right. The Swiss Mechatronic Art Society, we regularly get pretty small funding just to kind of do a series of cultural events. But it's mostly based on volunteering and also a small membership fee, so to use the space. And because the rent is so little, we can, in fact, self-manage. We can run the space without funding. But I would personally, with the Hackteria network, I would love to bring the international network here with a residency program. I would also like to professionalize my work, also having, let's say, some administrative help and stuff like this, and better communication, which at the moment with this tiny funding that we had for Hackteria for local activities was not possible. But I'm aiming a bit for larger funding. The people that come here are mostly like, they do it on their own budget. So, and we have, of course, we just open when activities have closed. So we have to deal with the fact in the future when, let's say, a startup will kind of use the space for a presentation, or if someone wants to make a business out of it. This is problems we haven't experienced yet, but it's some problems, challenges every hackerspace has to deal with, and we will manage. But it's a bit challenging that some people using the space are more from the doing it in the free time hackers, while some of them are professional cultural workers organizing workshops and want to get paid for our work. It's a challenge we haven't solved, and being transparent about all these numbers, I think, is the best way to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Marc, for sharing your research and your ideas with us in this collaborative format. I think if anybody is interested in, if anybody has remaining questions on the live stream, you can don't hesitate to email us your feedback or add your comment to the live stream's chat. Is there anything that you want to add to finish up, Marc, before I do?
I don't know if my last slide is still visible somewhere. So we have Tuesday night, which is a bit the open lab situation from both the biolab people, but also the electronics crew. So everybody's welcome to join us on Tuesday, because we have this virtual world that allows you to interact, and a bunch of people always shows up. The website is easier to remember. It's island.hackteria.org. You might bump into Adam Zaretsky next Tuesday, or you might bump into Miranda Moss, which are not even here, like working on some chicken art, and you might bump in some of our local electronic synthesizer geeks, and some cameras will also be in the room. It's Swiss time, so it's about this time now, but on Tuesdays. So you're welcome to join our community also like this.
Thank you so much, Marc. Really appreciate you being here. Sorry, Jennifer, did you have any last?
Just before you move on, we want to say thank you, Marc.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for hosting. It was cool also to experiment with different kind of interactivities and different cameras. It was a learning phase for me. Thanks, Amanda, also for kind of motivating me to make this a bit different than just with the laptop.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations to both of you again. Thanks, Jennifer, and your team for showing us around. Really great. I want to do a shameless plug, just that our next BioArt Kitchen Hangout is going to be with Marta de Menezes in May of 2021, and it's going to be a really fun BioArt card game. So I hope that people can join us for that stream. Anyone interested in our event today or future events can follow us on at IOTA Institute. And yes, thank you so much, everyone, and I hope that we see you at the next BioArt Kitchen Hangout.
Ja, schon fertig. Ich mach mal mute.